These notes are going to go over how to create an equation from a graph of sine and cosine. So first let's talk about the formula, the kind of basic kind of template. So in the classroom we wrote the y equals, and we could have a positive or a negative in front of the a value, a sine or a cosine, and then b, and then parentheses x minus h, and then plus k. Now, in the one we're going to talk about today, we're going to use A, B, C, and D. So C is the same thing as H. It's the horizontal shift. D is the same thing as K, which is the vertical shift, or the midline. And then A is your amplitude, and B has to do with your horizontal stretch and compression, which you have to use your period to find as far as what's happening there. So let's go ahead and talk about the graph in general, so a little bit of review. So I've got a graph done here, and we're going to talk about the different parts. So if I'm looking for amplitude, that is how large it is, or frequency. When you think about finding amplitude, you can go from the minimum to the maximum and find the difference. So if I'm looking here at the max, that's at 4, and the minimum is at 0, that whole thing then gets split in 2. So 4 take away 0 gives me a total of 4. Divided by 2, I have 2. So my amplitude is 2. And that is always positive. It's an absolute value. The sign of the equation comes into play about the graph, and we'll talk about that in a second. So to find the midline, we go halfway in between that. So if we think about amplitude as 2, from the top we can go 2 down, or from the bottom 2 up, and then our midline would be right here. And I'm going to do a dotted line here, and that is actually an equation, and that would be y equals 2. So our D, or our K, is going to be y equals 2, or 2. So as an equation, we would write it y equals 2. And here we would just say D is 2, okay? And that's a positive 2. So now let's think about what type of graph we want to talk about. So if we're talking about sine always starts at the midline. So this starts at midline, which we drew our dotted line. So if we're thinking about sine, I'll use a little highlighter here. Here is sine. It would start right here. We want to go closest to our y-axis. And to do one full cycle, we want to look at what we start at. We go to the max, back to the intersect, to the min, and then back to where we started. That is one full cycle for sine. Now, to find the value that goes in front of the a value, whether it's a negative or positive graph, we have to look at what type it is. So we've determined that we're going to look at this one as a sine for a moment. And if we start at the midline and we're moving towards the max, that is a positive. So if we go towards the max, that is positive. So we have a positive sign in front of our equation. If we start at the midline and we start going towards the bottom, so let's say I started here and I moved this way and I wanted to write it as a cosine, of course it would continue on. It's moving towards the min, that means it would be a negative. Okay, so if it starts at the max, it's positive, starts at and moves towards the min, it is negative. Always sine starts at the midline, and then you think about where is it moving towards first. So if it's going up, it's positive. If it's moving down first, it's negative. Now, we can look at the same graph and look at it in terms of cosine. So we're going to look and see what would cosine look like. So let's pick a different color here. All right, so cosine starts at either the min or the max. So we could say if we started up here at the max, and we go one full cycle, we would actually go and we would come back to the max. That would be a cosine. Now we could see it over here as well. If we started at the max and we went down and come back up till we got to the max again, this is one full period or full cycle. Okay, so that helps us find our B value. Okay, so our B value is when we look for the period, which is what we talk about from trough to trough or max to max or min to min, or you can think about one full cycle. If we start, where does it end? And it's not always easy to see if it's been phase shifted. So like, for example, this cosine value has been shifted. So we'll talk about that in a second. So, but for cosine, for our sines, we have to think about a little bit differently. So for a cosine, it always starts on the min or the max. So our cosine starts at max or min. If it starts at the max, it's positive. If it starts at the min or minimum, it's negative. So that's a way to kind of know what sign's going to go in front of your A, your amplitude. Okay. Now with writing equations, we can actually write equations for this that have, for one for sine and one for cosine, using the same graph. And sometimes that confuses people, but it depends on where you look. So let's look at just our sine. So we're going to get rid of some of this here, so we can just focus on our sine. All right, so in the yellow highlighted is a complete cycle of sine. Notice it starts at the midline and it's moving up, so we know it's going to be positive. So we'll make a little note that this is going to be positive. We already know our amplitude. We already know our D, our vertical shift. And we also need to find our period. So it starts at the y-axis, which is great, and one full cycle, it ends at 2 pi. So 2 pi is going to be our period. So we're going to use this to find B. So B is actually being found by saying 2 pi divided by B is equal to our period. So our period for this one, because we started at 0, 0 basically, or 0, 2, and moved over to 2 pi here, we ended our cycle, that's 1 period. So our period for us is 2 pi. So we're going to plug into this formula. So 2 pi over B is equal to 2 pi, and we're going to solve for B. Well, let's think about that. What would our period be? So if we times both sides by B, whatever, and then we think, okay, well, that cancels that out. We have 2 pi equals 2 pi B, and then divide by 2 pi, divide by 2 pi. That is actually just 1. So B is 1. Okay, so you're trying to find, using your period, means a complete cycle, where did it start and end, the difference. You can look at it that way. Now, if it's truly something not starting at 0, 0, you can think from trough to trough. So let's think about if I was looking for sine and I started it, let's say here. Okay, it's still a midline. Now it's moving down towards the minimum first, so that would be a negative. And then moving up, and one full cycle back would stop at pi. But it started at negative pi. And each of these little blocks, if you notice, I've skipped every other one, is worth 1/4 of a pi. Okay, so we can think about how far we went. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 1/4 pi's. So we have 8 times pi over 4, which gives us 8 pi over 4, which is the same thing as saying 2 pi. And so that's the same thing we got when we started over here. So that tells you can find it no matter what. You can find your period from trough to trough, or if it happens to start at the beginning, that's great as well. So now that we already know our period, we found our B, we got to look to see if there's a phase shift. So a phase shift means that it shifts left or right away from like where the parent function would be. Well, if we look at this one, we know it's moved up or down from the parent function, because we can think about the parent function starting here for sine and going up and back down and back up, whatever it may be. So we know it's shifted up. So now we have to think, did it shift left or right? Well, it starts at the y-axis, so it has no shift at all as far as phase shift, okay? So we can go ahead now and write our equation for this in sine. So we know that it is y, and we know that this is positive, and we had a 2, and we're doing sine. Our b we found was 1, so we don't need anything there. We can just say x. And then our d was a positive 2, so plus 2. So that is the equation for this graph in sine. So now let's talk about doing it in cosine. So if we look at cosine, we know that cosine starts at the min or the max. So we can either start here or we can start here. Okay, it's going to make us have two different type of equations, but they're still going to be equivalent. So I like to start on the left side of the graph of the y-axis if it's not perfectly off, whatever's closest. So I'm going to start it over here at the negative pi over 2. So I'm going to start here, and one cycle would be that's minimum, go up to the max, and back to the min. So that's one full cycle. Okay. Now, the cool thing about cosine is it has the same amplitude. It has the same d because our min and max hasn't changed, our midline hasn't changed, our amplitude hasn't changed. It actually has the same b because our period hasn't changed. Our period's our period. The only thing that is different is possibly the sign that goes in front of a and the phase shift. So notice that this does not start at the y-axis. This starts over. So we are over here that much. It's shifted that much. Instead of starting down here, it started, or if we are a parent function down below, it started over here at negative pi 2. So negative pi 2 is actually our phase shift. Okay, so this is our phase shift. And to find our c, which is what's in our equation, if we write it without the parentheses, go ahead and kind of distribute these. To find our c, we actually, it's the same thing as saying c over b is equal to phase shift. Well, if we know our phase shift is negative pi over 2, we don't know c, but we do know b is 1, then we know that our c is going to be negative pi over 2. Now, let's put that into a formula. So we have y equals, I'm not going to worry about our sine yet. We'll talk about that in a second. We still have the same amplitude, but this time cosine. Our b is still 1, but this time we have a phase shift. So we are going to do x. 1 times x is still x, and then our negative is in our formula, and then our negative pi over 2, which makes this a big positive, because we know we shifted left, which means that's got to be a positive, and then plus 2. Now let's look at our sign. Make sure we're right. We started here at the bottom, okay, at the minimum, so we've got to have a negative there, cosine, okay, because we started at the bottom. Now, if we started at the top and we went from up here down, it would be starting at the max, we would have a positive. Okay, so we did a little class notes. I will put the key with that connected underneath this video, so you'll see the full key, but we talked the same kind of method as the example I just showed.